Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty, and joining me this week is Tim Suto.
Howdy.
It's Easter for some people. Well, I guess it's Easter for everybody. You just may not actually observe it.
Church's Chicken couldn't give me anything to eat today, then being closed.
Yeah, how can you have church in your name and be closed on Easter? Anyway, the Atheist Experience is a live call-in public access show, broadcast every Sunday beginning at 4:30. It's a chance for atheists in Austin to speak out to people in the community and for people in our community to call in and talk to us, ask us questions, discuss issues, current events and religious. The show is available at our website as well. You can download the audio portion of the program, and also that's podcast. So special welcome to those of you who are listening via podcast or download. We're sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. In addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio program called The Nonprofits, hosted by Jeff D., co-hosted by Dennis Lubay, and featuring Russell Glasser and myself. We'll be live again this coming Saturday, April 22nd. You can listen at freethoughtradio.com, and for more information, you can also visit nonprofitsradio.com. We host a lecture series once a month, and this month's lecture will be April 23rd. It'll be the fourth Sunday of the month instead of the third Sunday of the month. And we also have a number of social events, including Atheist Happy Hour, which is currently occurring at Ninfa's on Anderson near 183 I-35. That's Thursdays at 7:30. And the cast and crew of this program have been going to dinner after the show, and we're currently going to Threadgill's on Riverside. The show is on the air until 6 o'clock. We normally arrive somewhere between 6:30 and 6:45. Dinner after the show, and all of our other events are open to any atheist or atheist-friendly people. You don't have to be a member to attend. And for more information on all of these events, you can visit our website, www.atheist-community.org. And you can, if you're wanting to call into the program, we'll have the number up for you shortly. It'll be your chance to call in, say what's on your mind, or address the topics we're talking about. If you're wanting to come to one of our events to preach or proselytize, don't bother. Just call in when we put the number up. And anybody who doesn't get through on the telephone or doesn't want to get through on the telephone can email us at tv@atheist-community.org. That email goes to myself, the co-hosts, the cast, the crew behind the scenes. Everybody gets it, and we try to respond as quickly as we can. So, without any further ado, we'll go to Tim, who's filling in for us this week. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I found out a few minutes ago I'm being here talking to everyone, and what I wanted to talk today about was a topic that has become an atheist topic, even though sort of indirectly, is evolution, and it's one of my favorite topics, and we had some really exciting stuff happen this week in evolutionary study. One thing is this fossil fish with limbs is a missing link, and fossil hunters may have discovered the fish that made humans possible. They found a fish that was existed about 380 million years ago, and it was part of the transition to land. The name is called the tiktaalik. I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but you can do a search for news on this on the internet, and you'll probably find it. And this animal represents the transition from water to land, a part of the history that includes ourselves, said paleontologist Neil Shubin of the University of Chicago. Shubin was co-leader of a team that uncovered 3 nearly complete fossils measuring up to 9 feet long in 2004. And this is a really important discovery because it shows what wasn't existing before was a fossil record of a animal that was making its way from the water to land. And the thing about this was that fins, which existed in sort of the coelacanth type fishes, had started to develop, and we had the first formation of what would be called a wrist bone. And it's very exciting, and it's more evidence for science and what we can learn from science and how this, find out how we came to be. And we can throw the phone number up on the screen anytime, but what I'd like to talk about today is some of these things that make how humans came to be from this long line of evolution, because it's always asked of us, and a lot of times it's asked with 2 minutes left to go in the show, and we don't really get time to address it completely. So I'd like to go over a few of these things.
It's kind of interesting to me. I was thinking about this earlier. You know, we've got this story about this fossil fish, and there are a few other new discoveries within evolutionary biology that are significant discoveries. Things that you know, often you'll have a claim that, well, there are no transitional fossils, or you're unable to find the missing link, and then every time they do, that just makes a gap on either side for somebody to question. But it struck me as amusing today that probably within the last 2 weeks, there have been more significant discoveries with regard to evolution than there have for intelligent design in its entire history. At least as far as verifiable science.
How many discoveries have they had?
Zero. A bagel.
Zero.
Donuts.
Oh.
Nothing.
Yeah, I was having trouble counting, but then I realized, there weren't any. But, a big thing that makes it difficult for people to comprehend what happens in evolution is the difficulty that people have understanding two concepts. One is the concept of long periods of time, and the other is exponential numbers. The first, with the long periods of time, most people can't really comprehend a time period more than about 10 years with a firm grasp. And we're talking with evolution about the length of time that the Earth has been in existence, which is 4.6 to 4.7 billion years, and that's a huge amount of time. By comparison, creationists, many who call themselves New Earth creationists, are looking at 6,400 years of time. And to sort of put that in perspective, if you were to break down those fractions into 1 year, the length of time that we're talking about for which evolution and the length of the Earth, 4.7 billion years, would be 1 year. And the length of time for the 6,400 years that creationists had to work with is the length of time that it takes the ball to drop. It would be the last 43 seconds of the year. It's not much to work with. So when you have that little time to work with, you need fantastic stories and huge jumps and things just being created out of nothing. But in actuality, we have this 4.7 billion years of time to work with, and so things happen very gradually. The other concept that people, including myself, have a difficult time understanding is exponential numbers and how things jump exponentially. As an example, there are about 13 times 10 to the, I believe it's 33rd power number of cells in an elephant. And it's a huge number, fantastic number. You can't even conceive of it. But exponentially, the way things go is if you have a piece of paper, and if theoretically you could fold it over itself only 57 times, you would have the number of cells that are in an elephant, and coincidentally, that pile of paper would reach all the way to about Mars. Well, actually, we're on top of the table, so, Mars plus the distance from the table to the floor. But, as things double and increase exponentially, a lot of possibilities happen, and that's how a lot of embryology and a lot of the jumps in evolution occur, and how things double. If you look at our bodies right now, we have bilateral symmetry. There wasn't a separate, evolutionary event that created my right arm and created my left arm. They happen together, and because of the bilateral symmetry that dictates the body plan of human beings and most animals, particularly deuterostomes, those things happen at once. If you're going to get one arm, the other one comes too. It's a paired match. So that's an important thing of how these things happen in evolution and how we account for the vast number of changes. Now, people are confused about the definition of what evolution means. And it doesn't mean just the changes of one animal to another. There isn't a purpose behind evolution. That's a big difference between creationism and biblical or theological story and the secular evolution. Evolution doesn't have a purpose. It is just an explanation of how populations change, particularly the allele frequencies in populations. An allele is a piece of information that it expresses itself in a morphological way, or a change in the body of the thing that it exists for. You have your DNA, and you have all these alleles, millions of them, and some of them don't do anything, but some of them do affect the way bodies grow and bodies form and how the future bodies of our inherited genes continue. And those alleles are what are measured in evolution. We are measuring in a population, say people for instance, how allele frequency changes over time. So if you have people who have blue eyes and brown eyes, over time you can measure in a population how the what percentage of people have blue eyes as opposed to brown eyes, and different other factors of people. What people look like also functions of their biology, how diseases they have, how their digestion works, and you do this for all animals. And evolution is the explanation of how this happens, and that means of those changes is natural selection. Darwin is often credited with having brought up the theory of evolution, but really that's a collective term that sort of came later. He focused, and what he is credited most with in the scientific community is explaining the means of evolution, and that is natural selection, how alleles and genes are chosen for in populations. And what happens is, since there's no goal and you don't have a creator, each living thing has two purposes, or basically one purpose. That's combined in two parts. One, it must develop and consume material to reach sexual maturity, and then it has to reproduce. If it doesn't reproduce, it's not successful. They talk about the term survival of the fittest. Well, fitness in biology is the ability to reproduce. If you reproduce, you're fit. If you don't reproduce, you're not fit. The more you reproduce, the fitter you are. So each time an animal mates, or if they're having asexual selection, they pass on genes and to their offspring. Most of the time, this copying method is extremely accurate. We don't have many changes at all, but with billions of years and billions of organisms living at once, trillions of organisms, even on my body right now, I have billions of bacteria that are living that I don't even know about, which is, you got them too. But occasionally, an error will happen, and you have what's called a mutation. And most mutations aren't helpful, because if you look at us right now, Matt and I, we have a certain body plan, we have certain genes, and that work for human beings. This has been successful for our parents and our parents' parents, generally, pretty similar plans. If we have a mutation that changes us drastically, it's not going to lead to our fitness. One, it could lead to poor health, and we might not survive. And two, we might not be successful at getting mates.
Could be a gene mutation that causes us to want to shave our heads and wear loud shirts.
Oh yeah, that's
it's a special day. It's spring.
Yeah, this still is the Atheist Experience today. It's not bald guys with loud shirts.
It can be both.
Well, yeah. But with the mutations, you have the important thing is sexual success, and if you have a mutation that changes you drastically, even though you may be successful in living and producing for yourself, if you say you have an arm missing, other mates are not going to find you attractive because you don't have the characteristics that they have experienced and have determined that indicate health. So if you have a missing arm, while you may still be able to function for yourself and live a long life, your mates might not be attracted to you. So there's two factors. You have to be able to survive and you have to mate successfully. And most mutations don't result in that. Or they don't express themselves in a morphological way or in phenotypically. They might be in DNA that changes and doesn't actually have a change on the way the body is created or how the body works. But on the rare occasion, you have mutations that do change things for the better, usually slightly, and give a small advantage. And these small advantages over time have in 4.7 billion years led from sludge turning into Harvard professors, as I'm often asked by people. Why doesn't this happen? Why don't we see sludge turning into Harvard professors? Well, it takes a long time because you need lots of these mutations to happen.
There's also the issue that, at least in the current theory of abiogenesis and how it may have happened, the environmental conditions that were on Earth at the time that what we would term sludge transformed, they don't exist anymore. The Earth has changed. The chemical compounds in the atmosphere, et cetera, have changed since 4.7 billion years ago. Or
each living thing is adapted to the environment of its recent parental, genealogical, evolutionary history. If you change the environment drastically and put it in a different environment, it may not be successful. So, measuring success, people call humans the top of the evolutionary ladder, but we're successful in our environment. There's other bodies, particularly bacteria, which represent most of life on this earth, that are successful in their niche.
Not only that, but the entire concept of evolution as a ladder, it would work for a given ancestry.
Yeah.
That would be a ladder. You are more involved than your ancestors. But when you're comparing a snapshot in time of multiple species, there's no ladder. It's not that we're more evolved than chimpanzees. Yeah. We just evolved differently.
Yeah, you evolve differently, but it's all measured on your ability to reproduce, on your fitness and success. So if you have offspring and a bacteria has offspring, and for evolution, you're equal.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a call.
Move on to some calls?
Yeah, we'll go on to this more later.
All right, we got, is it Darby?
Yeah, hi.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Actually, I just flipped on the TV and you already hit my main point, was that you both shaved your heads and you're wearing loud shirts.
Yeah. Happy Easter.
Which, separately, you both look great. It really does. But together, I don't know. It's kind of shocking.
Yeah, it was an odd coincidence that Tim had to fill in at the last minute, and
I had to borrow a shirt from someone else, and because the shirt I had on was bright white, and that just worked horrible for TV. I would just glow at you. You wouldn't be able to see anything at all.
Okay, well, I was thinking I might have to go out and shave my head if I'm an atheist now.
No. Everyone else here today has hair.
It's been kind of traditional, and Ashley had his shaved, and Russell evidently did it once.
Yeah.
Mine's in the process slowly of growing back out, but it'll never be full. Do you have anything else for us?
Oh, just happy Zombie Day. My HEB was closed, and I was thinking, it's because a guy moved his stone and walked out of his grave.
Yeah.
And I just think all the zombie movies I've seen, usually they're following him with torches and rocks. They're not, worshiping him.
Evidently, around the first century, zombies were a little bit better respected.
I guess so.
They're a little friendlier, maybe?
Yeah. Follow me.
Anyway, that's all I had for you. Just, we're changing it to Zombie Day instead of Easter.
I like that. Thanks a lot, Darby. Yeah, that's, it being Easter and, not to derail this discussion of evolution, because I'd much rather discuss something, real. But it being evolution and, Easter, this, among Western Christians and Eastern Christians celebrate it on a different day, but both of them, it's a day for them to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, and if there happen to be any Christians watching the program and you're enjoying your Sunday, spending it with us atheists, there's a number of questions you can ask about the resurrection in kind of a quiz format, like, I don't know, who carried Jesus' cross? We'll start way before the resurrection. We'll start around the crucifixion. Who carried Jesus' cross? Think about it for a while, see if you can come up with an answer, call in, and we'll see if you're right. We've got, is it Chris?
Yeah, that's me.
Hey, welcome.
Hey.
Howdy.
I don't want to start this off combatively, but I disagree with what you're saying.
About what?
I mean, sort of, I understand your intellectual argument about how God and the whole creation, it's a hollow argument. I mean, it does take a leap of faith, and that's one of the cornerstones of Christianity, is that
right.
leap of faith.
Yeah.
But trying to explain away things intellectually, there's holes in every argument. I mean, evolution, there are dozens of holes. I mean,
just because evolutionary theory isn't a panacea, it's not an answer for everything. That doesn't in any way discount the theory. It only is what it claims to be, and where you may find gaps are areas that we just don't have an answer for yet. And it's okay to say we don't know the answer to that question, rather than just saying, "Oh wait, I know the answer. God did it."
And you got to focus on what evolution is. Evolution is explaining changes in allele frequency in a population over time.
I understand that.
Can we not demonstrate that allele frequency changes over time in populations?
Okay.
I mean,
but what my problem with the whole argument is, and I'm sure you're going to dispute this, is that reproduction is half chance. I mean, sure, the stronger of the species do reproduce more than the other half, but the other half get their chance too. So how do you, so it's really 50-50. I mean, I'm not speaking, I'm a biology minor, I studied sociology. If you look at the data, over the course of centuries, literally the evolution and progress of different species is really half chance, and half, maybe through
I don't have any problem with chance playing a factor in it.
But okay, what is chance? Chance is something that can't be controlled. Chance is,
what you may consider to be chance may in fact not be chance. Just like what we may consider to be random or noise may not be random or noise. It may be an emergent activity.
But see, that's going outside the argument to me.
Well, but the big thing in biology
that evolution is sort of the pathology, the progression of our species, of every species, then you can't have this secondary argument, this alternate argument that chance.
It's not an alternate argument. Chance is included.
How is it included? You're saying that the strong survive and reproduce, and that limits the gene pool and perpetuates.
No. Evolution says the tendency is for the more fit to survive. At any given moment, what determines what is fit may change. That's an aspect of natural selection. There's no guiding force. It's when I talk about like emergence. For instance, what is it that makes me intelligent? Each individual neuron in my brain isn't intelligent, but their combined activity produces a phenomena that we refer to as intelligence.
Right,
within natural selection, sure, you could say that a storm hits a particular area and that changes the ecosystem, but that the fact that the storm occurred by chance or by perhaps a pattern that we're unable to discern is irrelevant. It's still part of natural selection. Natural selection includes all of the factors acting on something, even if we can't identify all of them.
Okay, but what if the patterns that you can't identify and your chance is something beyond?
Like God?
I'm not saying it's God. I'm just saying, but the area of belief. The reason I struggle. Initially I was agnostic in college. And then I rolled around. I looked at I looked at Buddhism and Taoism and all these different things. And what I came to was that the idea that there is nothing beyond me. That's what I struggle with, as far as solely relying on that things happen in a perpetual kind of reasonable state. because there are things like you just mentioned that happen that we can't explain.
Okay, there are things that aren't. There are things that can't be explained, or you don't have an explanation for them, but that doesn't mean you just fill in something else. What biologists do is they're looking at the world and they're assigning things. They're trying to determine what are the variables to measure to determine what determine the success of one living thing over another. Just because you haven't identified the proper variable or you haven't had an observation of thing doesn't mean that it discredits, the theory of evolution. It just means you don't have the information yet, and it doesn't mean that you should assign something like God to it.
Well, what I'm saying, like in general, in math equations, in theory math, when variables aren't identifiable, they identify X and try to work, backwards to figure it out. What I'm saying is that, there are so many things that aren't explainable.
Okay, what makes you think you should have an explanation right now?
Well, that's the age-old question. Since time began, since man started writing, is why.
No, why for you? No, why for you?
For you, you're saying that there are things which are unexplained, and that's uncomfortable. I completely agree. It's uncomfortable not to know everything. But what makes you think that there's an answer that's attained that you can actually have right now? And what makes you think, for example, that God or some transcendent intelligence is a reasonable answer? What basis is there for believing that? Because that, to me, I don't deny that it's possible that a God could exist.
Okay, well, that's good.
This is not a position. Atheism is not necessarily. There are strong atheists who would say there are no gods, but it's not necessarily a positive assertion that God as a concept is impossible or absolutely does not exist.
Right.
The position is one of, I have no reason to believe in a God. I deny the existence of God. I believe there is no God because there's no evidence to say otherwise. And the claim itself is such, as we've provided lots of examples over time on the show of the difference between saying you have a pet dog and you have a pet dragon. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, and the claim of a transcendent, intelligent, all governing being is an extraordinary claim, and for that there should be extraordinary proof. And I think it is unreasonable to just assume a priori that he exists in order to fill those gaps that are uncomfortable for people.
Okay, that does make sense. But if you pick apart what you were saying, the extraordinary evidence is when you wake up in the morning, you have a world to live in that functions on every level.
That's evidence of the world.
You're going to do a circular proof. If you start with what makes
hang on. The circular proof is when you begin to claim that the evidence for God is when I wake up in the morning, I have a world to live in. Because the only way you can make the final claim is to assume the prior.
I understand that. What I'm getting at is that you're saying there's no extraordinary evidence. It's kind of like saying, do you believe in love or no?
Just because things in life are extraordinary,
it does exist in our world.
Just because things are extraordinary in life doesn't mean that you assign this cause. You have to, those things.
There has to be a reason.
No.
You guys are explaining a reason of why things aren't or why things are. Then at the same time, you're trying to discount somebody's belief in the reason why things are.
No, I'm saying that belief is not supported by reason and evidence. And like you said when you originally called in, it requires a leap of faith. Well, faith, for me, is believing in something without supporting evidence or believing in something in the face of evidence to the contrary. It's belief without a good reason, and I have no use for that.
Okay, so how do you explain love?
I don't know that I necessarily can or have to explain love.
If that automatically makes you accept the leap of faith because you can't explain it.
No.
How? So you can rationalize love?
Just because you have evidence of an existence of something doesn't mean you have evidence of the cause of something.
Well, that's my point exactly.
But you don't have evidence of the existence of a God. God is what you're claiming is the cause of evering else.
But okay.
Now hang on.
Okay.
With regard to love,
Right.
I have no problem accepting a theory that defines something which I've experienced. I've experienced something which I classify as love. It may be completely different from what you classify as love.
I agree.
It's a completely esoteric experience. Now, I can say that this is chemical changes inside my head, that this is what actually causes the feeling. It's biological. It's electrochemical. I don't know for sure what actually causes love, but I do know that it is something that I have experienced. Now, could it be an illusion or a delusion or anything else? Yes, because personal experience is a poor way to discern anything. The way to narrow things down further is if something is objectively or empirically observable by more than one people, or by more than one person at the same time.
There are many more people in love than you, or have been in love.
You and I might look at a couple and we would both say they're in love, and that to me is the point where we've reached an empirical observation which is observable by more than one person, and it's no longer just me feeling something, it's us defining something. Now, what actually causes love, that may be something which is unanswered.
I agree.
Now, with regard to God, God is the thing that you're claiming is the cause of something.
It's the cause of love, is what I'm claiming.
Okay, fine. I know, for example, I will accept it for argument and everything else that love exists. I don't know that God exists. You actually have to provide evidence that first, God exists, and second, that he is the cause, author, governing force behind love. You can't make that connection, and you cannot say that because love exists and we can't explain it, therefore God exists, because that's definitely circular.
I mean, logically, that is not the path it doesn't create a logical path.
Which would take us back to faith again.
Right. But what I'm getting at, and what I'm getting at is that when you come to that point, how do you still stick to this whole rational idea of thought when there's something that's, I think is important to the world, which is love. Because without it, if we just, everything was rational and empirical and calculated, the world would be a very mechanical kind of place.
I disagree.
No.
I don't think the world is mechanical, and I think we live in a world that is based on rational, empirical observations, etc.
Okay, what I'm getting at is that I'm trying to. I think both of our arguments have no endpoint. That's what I'm getting at.
Well, I'm not making an argument for something in the sense that you are, where I'm not. Basically, what I'm saying is that it's okay not to know the answer. It's always, we're going to keep striving to find answers. What it's not okay to do is claim that you have the answer or believe without good evidence that your answer happens to be correct. If you can't support it, if there's not evidence for it, then there's no good reason to say that it's correct. And just because feeling alone or feeling overwhelmed or feeling love or whatever and the insecurity of not perhaps knowing an answer, those are not justifications to go ahead and say, well, these other people throughout history have said, you know what, I think there's a God up there who's the governing body for this, and I'll go ahead and accept that because it feels good and it makes me not so anxious about not having correct answers to things. Because those same people who believed in God X may have believed in God Y at another point, and Zeus is the cause of lightning bolts. And every time we find one of these issues, like here's a phenomena, we have an explanation for it, lightning, for example, and a religion has said one thing. When science has investigated it and come up with something contrary, science has won out every single time. No exceptions. I think if I'm going to base my worldview on anything, I'm going to base it on the most reliable way of discerning the truth about things.
Why does it have to be black and white? That's my only concern, and what you're saying is that, intellectually, it doesn't make sense to corner yourself into an argument.
I'm not cornered. I'm not cornered. One of the free things about not being religious and relying on scientific evidence is when new evidence is presented, I can now change my mind and change my position. I have new evidence, and I can make up my mind based on the new evidence. I'm not cornered or blocked in or anything. It is the epitome of freedom.
If you were a scientist in the year 500, I mean, your view of the world would be completely different based on the evidence and scientific knowledge then than it is now.
Yes.
So, but religion, the belief from that time period to now has not changed.
Well, that's proof that it must be true.
Yeah,
no, I'm not saying it's not be true, but I'm saying, but if you have a truth that lasts 2,000 years and you have a truth that constantly evolves.
No. You have a claim that has lasted thousands of years.
In millions of forms.
Versus something which has evolved. Personally, I'll go with evolution. I'll go with a continuing process of discovering, redefining, and better defining the world we live in, rather than jumping on
better define it. It complicates it more.
No.
Well, sure. Who says things have to be simple?
Yeah.
Well,
the same person who said we need an answer right now.
You're saying that the more knowledge you get, the less you have to think about things. I'm saying that the more knowledge we get, the more that things seem so unknowledgeable. I mean, the more we know about this planet, the
you've
less
You've misunderstood something somewhere. I did not say that the more complicated things get, the less we have to think about them.
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't know specifically if I said that, but what I'm getting at is that what you're saying is that the more knowledge you get, the better handle you get on things. And what I'm saying is the more we know about this planet scientifically, we find out there's a dozen questions to every question we answer.
Sure.
Yeah.
But you still know more at time B than you did at time A. And your worldview is still better and more accurate at time B than it was at time A because you have more information. That's pretty much definitional.
Yeah, it's based on this, sort of like, I've moved 5 feet out of my bed, but I'm still in my house, so I only have 10 feet to go out to my door, so I've made 1/3 of the journey.
What I'm getting at is that if you take the scientific thought, if you're 5 feet outside your bed, at that point at 5 feet, you don't have any concept of what 10 feet is. You don't have any concept of what...
Sure you do.
It's twice what you want.
Come on. In year 500, they had any idea that we'd be able to create a...
Are you really seriously saying this? Because first of all, in the bedroom analogy, I can see 5 feet, and I also have gone 5 feet from a previous instance, so I have something to compare it to. In the regard to the real world, have you never read science fiction? And have you not gone back and looked at science fiction and the thoughts and ideas of creative minds going beyond what their technology is, and here it is coming real now? Of course you can see farther. You just don't see it as accurately until you actually get there. And when you get there, you have the benefit of the knowledge which has been arrived at from scientific investigation and rational thought, not from religious dogma or claims about, all-encompassing answers. I appreciate the call. We got other people on hold.
I appreciate the discussion.
You're welcome to call back. I just don't want to tie up one line for way too long because we have other people on hold. And as a reminder, any atheists or atheist-friendly people who are wanting to meet the cast and crew will be going to dinner after the program tonight at Threadgill's on Riverside. If you're unable to get through on the telephone, or if you don't want to, you can email tv@atheist-community.org. That goes the entire cast and crew. If you're on and we end up cutting you off before you're done, you're welcome to call back. You're welcome to write in, and you're welcome to tune in again next week. We are on every week, and you can call in again then earlier in the program. And we'll try and get to you. You had a comment.
Yeah, well, the thing I love is he's going back to the God is the explanation,
right?
And rather than give an explanation based on things that have actually been seen, you're giving this explanation based on assumptions of things that no one has ever seen happen.
And a really ill-defined explanation.
An ill-defined explanation, and using these examples like it's always a miracle, but there's never going to be any more miracles that are going to happen again. They're never, the walking on water, all these things that happen that supposedly explain things, and show me these things. It's never happened. Show me the real blood out of the Virgin Mary, or statue.
Out of the statue, I was like, wow. Now there's not only is God pretty much the idea. It's different to every person. So, when you start saying, well, God is the answer for this, or God is love, or God is the creator and everything else, you have a certain concept in your mind of God, which may be completely different from everybody else. It is an ill-defined non-answer. And that doesn't mean that there isn't a God. That's not proof that there isn't a God. But one of the things that we hear a lot is that, well, you can't prove that there is no God. Well, you don't have to.
No,
you shouldn't. The base assumption isn't that there's some supernatural sky pixie until we can prove there isn't. I mean, just like we don't assume that there are, leprechauns and fairies until we prove that they don't exist. The default position is that if the claim violates how we understand what we know and understand about reality, the default position is not to believe until evidence supports it.
Yeah. But often when people start assigning characteristics that are God, the God ceases to exist.
Yeah, he becomes impossible.
Yeah. Define him as impossible. People come up and challenge me on atheism, and they'll want to know what kind of, they'll want to argue against why I don't believe in their God. And I'm like, hey, you have to define it first.
Yeah, very first thing.
I can't even understand what they're talking about, what they're defining, especially when they,
if you have claims.
The different, ways that the Trinity is formed, and different ideas, and it's the depiction of Muhammad and everything is just
one of the problems is that if you define your God well enough, you can prove that it's logically impossible for him to exist. And so this kind of ethereal, non-defined God, you're relying on kind of a visceral reaction from people who've been raised in a culture that generally believes in God, to just accept your claim of God.
And the only God that can be everywhere, every time, and do is a God that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Is the non-existent God is the only one that can fulfill all those properties.
Let's go on to Joe Zamecki, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct.
Hey, buddy.
Howdy.
How'd the convention go?
Oh, the convention was great. We just got back just about an hour ago.
Great. Joe Zamecki, for those of you who don't know, is currently producing the ACA's newsletter, and a longtime member of the ACA, a good friend who used to be on this program as well. Just got back. The American Atheists had a convention in San Antonio this weekend. So why don't you give us a little bit about that and whatever else you wanted to talk about.
Well, it was a lot of fun, yes, and I do want to talk about evolution for a moment, but very briefly, the convention went great. We had Dr. Michael Shermer there, and I got his autograph on my convention program. Very proud of that. There was a God debate that went very well. The Christian and the evangelist on the other side was very cordial, and we enjoyed hearing him. But there were a lot of good social events, and we really enjoyed it. Just got back, and I urge everyone to check out, if you like to check out an atheist group, not only your local one, but your national one as well. There are several national atheist groups. And just to clarify, I edit the Atheist Community News. That's the name of it anyway. And by the way, I wanted to go into evolution real quick. A lot of Christians really feel that evolution is scary, not just because their Bible may say something against it to them, but also because evolution puts us in the same grouping with animals. And a lot of Christians, you can't anymore say, oh, those animals, because we're all animals.
Right.
With evolution. And so this scares a lot of Christians, and I believe that the Bible is one thing that does try to inspire in them this feeling that they transcend their own nature. Right,
they're the special chosen ones, and they are different from the rest of nature because they're God's, special little creatures.
If they're just animals too, then they're mortal forever also.
Yes. Well, I have always said, though, and I've met a lot of Christians who honestly feel that we are superior to all other animals. I would only say that our brain is, but that's it. I mean, there are plenty of other ways in which we are grossly inferior to certain animals. For instance, if you were to go out into the ocean with what you were born with and try to survive out there for a while, you'd be toast.
Right.
I mean, first of all, there are sharks and jellyfish, but other things. But the bottom line is we're not superior in that particular aspect, swimming and fighting off sharks. No. We're superior in thinking, and that's about it. So I'm happy with that.
Yeah, and my roommate and I have had discussions about natural selection with regard to humans, because obviously we have entered an era where we not only are beginning to get a good understanding of natural selection and evolution.
Artificial selection.
We now have artificial selection, and we are actually involved in artificial selection on ourselves. We're the first species that we know of who are actively, consciously able to kind of blaze their own trail, evolutionarily speaking. And that, to me, is really kind of interesting. And I don't know that it doesn't get around some of the problems that for example, Christians may feel by equating us with animals. I don't, it's, to me, the whole, oh, you're no better than animals, this injects a sort of moral philosophy overlay on evolution and natural processes, and I don't think that that's valid at all.
Well, hey, one more thing on a different subject, I'm sorry, but this is kind of important. Were you guys going to talk about the National Day of Prayer?
I didn't have actual notes on it, but yeah, it was planned to talk about this week before the end of the show, and also next week all the way leading up to it. It's May 5th, right?
I think it's May 4th.
May 4th? It would be, yeah, because that would be Thursday?
Yeah, no, it's a Thursday, yeah. At noon at the Capitol, and I'll wait to talk about it if you want.
No, go right ahead, because I'm actually going to be out of town that weekend.
Oh, okay, well, just at National Day of Prayer, this is something that happens at the state capitol once a year, and we atheists tend to want to picket that, and at several locations across the country, that's what's going to happen.
Yep.
And it's always friendly and respectful, and last year the atheist community of Austin had a good-sized picket, about 20 people showed up, and we had still cameras, and there are photos of that on our website, but it was a lot of fun, and we did do some educating, and it was all respectful, and everybody went home happy after some lattes, and a lot of fun, and it's a beautiful part of Austin to hold up a picket sign at anyway, and but anyway, that's just one thing we like to do. There's also the National Day of Reason.
Yep. Thanks. All right, well, thanks a lot, Joe.
Yeah. Yep, well, y'all have a great day.
You too. We'll see you later.
Matt and I were there last year, and we had a great time. It was a beautiful day. We were out with our friends, and yeah, it was a blast.
It's important because, I was fairly new to the group at the time. I'd only been here a few months, and I was still a little torn as to why somebody would go picket. Because on the one hand, this is all played up as just, well, we're exercising our freedom of religion to go pray. It's not anybody praying that we picket. It's the government's endorsement of this by official proclamation demonstrates a sort of favoritism towards religion in general and towards some specific religions. I mean, it was a Protestant singing, preaching, praying church service out there last year.
Wasn't Governor Perry's proclamation specifically Christian lean to it? The
prayer and everything else that he read seemed to be very kind of Protestant and even narrow within the Protestant scope. But the point of it is that it's okay for anybody who wants to on any given day is free to pray wherever they want to, including the Capitol steps, as long as it's allowed. The official proclamation of a National Day of Prayer and setting aside resources and time of government, people, and facilities to allow this to happen demonstrates a favoritism towards religion, which, in my opinion, and the opinion of the ACA, violates the separation of church and state.
Yeah, so and it's good for people to know about that.
Anybody who would like to come down and join us or meet us there, that'll be Thursday afternoon. Last year we were right down at the front of the walkway. I won't actually be there this year. I have to be out of town for my brother's graduation, but we'll be down there, and there'll be more information on that available on the website, and we'll talk about it more in coming weeks as well. We got. Want to keep going with calls?
Sure.
We got. Is it Rich?
Yeah.
Hey, Rich.
Howdy.
How's it going?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Pretty good. You guys doing a great job today.
Thanks, sir.
Before I lead up to my question, I wanted to kind of give you a little background. I kind of went through the same sort of stuff, basically as far as evolution goes on my own personal level. Whenever I first started trying to define God, I used to be a God-fearing believer. I am no longer.
Been there.
But when I started trying to define God for my own personal mental health reasons, decided that my definition of God and a lot of people that I talked to who were Protestant and Methodist and so forth and so on, it just didn't match up. And because of that, I ended up trying to reason in my own mind if God even really did exist. And through a relatively short period of time, ended up evolving my belief system, which ended up evidently to the point where I no longer believe in God.
Now, when you say you were reworking your belief system, was it did you rework this on, like all kinds of issues, or are we talking about just central to the question of God's existence, etc.?
Just to the existence of God, yeah. Because, it really does affect your interactions with other people.
Sure.
It affects your interactions with the world around, just in general. And so I was wondering if you thought that maybe evolution itself, untouched away from any kind of artificial selection by man, if it were just to be left alone and go its natural course, that through natural selection, you thought that maybe evolution, as far as mankind is concerned, that the brain power and the brain capacity and the way we use our brain is basically the next, or maybe not the way that evolution would be pushed, in a certain direction. Or
I'm not quite sure I understand.
Are you asking do you think that religion would become, the desire to think of a God concept would sort
be
of
obsolete?
Become obsolete?
Yeah.
Well, your basis is if evolution were left alone untouched from the beginning?
Well, yes.
Well, isn't that kind of what we...
No, because we are delving into it with all types of gene therapy and whatnot. It's
right now.
Yeah, sure.
Really catch-22, because you have the situation where having a being with our kind of brain power is going to alter his own path, and you can't get away from that. In order to it seems to me a given that a being with our brain power and our ability to manipulate the world around us is going to make these changes to himself.
So we're speeding it up.
It's part of. It's just a consequence of the way what we have. We're going to our ability to pass on information, our ability to use language is going to allow us to use information and pass it on to next generations. And we're going to build knowledge, and we're just going to keep on, utilizing that knowledge to manipulate the world around us, and that's going to include manipulating ourselves.
So do you think the manipulation is geared toward the brain capacity and brain power and brain ability?
Boy, I wish.
Or is it selection toward the body, like height and sight and hearing and?
Well, the thing is, most of the changes that happen to human bodies in the past since agriculture have been a result of changes in the way people are raised after they're born, and environment and nutrition. The reason people are taller now is mostly because they have better health and better food, and their environment is less taxing on their bodies in the sense of it allows them to grow better.
I thought it was because they were being select. A tall man is going to choose a tall woman and have tall
that
children.
happens sporadically, but on the whole, not really happening. If you look at the alleles that have the genes that have been in the gene pool for the past since agriculture, there have been really no new genes that have gone through in that have been added to the gene pool. We haven't had any major mutations that have changed things. If you go back to the continent of Africa, all the genes that exist for all the other ethnicities already existed in Africa in some way prior to people spreading out and prior to agriculture. So what you have patches of people selecting that way. If you have in the Norwegian communities, people are very tall on average compared to the rest of the world. But because we have transportation so much now, you aren't going to have that. That selection isn't really possible because people are more intermingling. So that's not any kind of path like that. You're not going to have the isolation that causes that. When you have gene flow within a population, that's going to cut down on any kind of isolation that's going to cause people to change in a different way. So unless we have some force that's changing the number of population and severely inhibiting our success in reproducing, that's not going to happen. So we're changing our lives in ways that are going back to altering with our health, and mainly doing things to make sure that we're more successful in our rate of reproduction per mating,
Right,
basically.
right.
If you look back through time, prior to 1900, the number one cause of death for men was warfare, and for women was childbirth.
Right.
And that's changed. Now you have all these new causes, and where life expectancy has gone up. And so people have changed in that way, but there's not really anything going on at the moment, or that I foresee specifically, that is going to cause us to have a direction in one way for what is going to be selected.
Right. I've read in several different magazines, science magazines, that they're doing gene manipulation, or at least considering doing gene manipulation, where we could live longer, be able to handle certain levels of radiation in outer space, so we could do long-range travel into outer space.
There's been a lot of research in the areas of health, life expectancy, intelligence, etc.
Right.
One important thing to remember, and I realize that we're just kind of doing a little exercise and
Sure.
amusing guesswork, is that one of the things Tim brought up at the beginning when we first started talking about evolution is that as humans we are really, really bad about evaluating long spans of time, and in reality, everything that we've talked about, with regard to gene manipulation, and even starting with agriculture on, is just a little blip on the evolutionary scale, and these changes, are very small over long periods of time. You had mentioned, are we speeding it up? Are
Yes.
we speeding up the evolution?
Yes.
Philosophically,
I'm
I think you could make an argument that we are making more changes in less time, which could be viewed as speeding it up. I definitely think that is something we can potentially do when we start looking at manipulating our genes for specific goals. But
if we're doing that, and I tend to think that's the direction we're heading. If we're doing that, wouldn't it be more wise to have higher IQs and higher brain capacity and brain ability, just in general, as part of the evolution that we're creating, basically?
Well, it depends on what your priorities are. All of our priorities in our ability to change to artificially select ourselves have been towards increasing our lifespan and our ability to reproduce.
But
And
what
this
good
has
is that
consequences.
if we can't think smart enough to know how to handle that longer life?
But assessing ability to handle that is an iffy thing, because some people who are very smart do very altruistic things that are wonderful for mankind. Some people who are very smart are horrible and are very destructive.
Right.
Trying to find the factors that increase intelligence in a general way don't necessarily select for improving the species. The problem is evolution selects for the individual. It selects for the success and fitness of an individual, and we're talking about selecting for the success of a species.
Yeah, there's kind of a hidden assumption there in that if we start selecting for better intelligence, we're assuming that is the trait which will benefit us, and that may not be the trait that's going to benefit us. I think it would be, but maybe longer life, healthier fitness that will allow us to adapt to greater changes in our environment and use less resources, etc. Maybe those are the traits.
Who chooses?
Right. Yeah. And actually, natural selection is going to choose. Now, we may dip our hand in and try and steer our direction, but you cannot beat natural selection.
Right.
If you guess wrong and you genetically engineer for situation A and situation B occurs, you're screwed, and that's it.
Yeah, it's like products in the market, right? In the marketplace.
If we talk about the carrying capacity of Earth, what is the carrying capacity for humans on the planet Earth? And depending on the situations, depending of what kind of lifestyle people are living, how much fuel they're using, how much consumption of food they are per person. There's a certain carrying capacity on how many humans can exist. And, as if we challenge that capacity a certain direction, it's very likely that the consequences will be dramatic.
Yeah.
You can talk about, and who gets selected from there could be very, it could be a individual thing where it's a biological thing where we have a disease that affects people, and that's what thins out the population. But then you could have something that's abiotic, where it's really, as far as what type of people, that's more going to be determined by where you were geographically when whatever happened.
I was just kind of thinking about the movie Gattaca, how that all went down, and who does choose?
Yeah.
Who becomes God?
And we're
I want you to vote for me.
All right.
Thanks a lot, Richard.
Thank you.
And we're a long ways off still from really changing genes so much. What's going on mostly at this point is that we can identify genes that are negative, like things for like Huntington's disease or Down syndrome, that you probably don't want if you don't have to.
They've also identified genes for things that are not necessarily negative, like eye color, etc. Those type of little things.
But basically, what you can do at this point is not so much sit there, like you're pushing Tetris pieces together to create the right DNA, but rather what you can do is you can screen for things that are critical, like critical health things, and you can screen the DNA of the genes of an embryo to find out if they have some critical things that are going wrong, and perhaps abort that before you put it through a life through of horrible problems.
Right.
And that's pretty much where we're at now, and it's going to be a bit of a ways before we get much beyond that.
Well, there's still a lot we don't know. We don't know how much, natural selection may be something by definition which would be impossible to actually like quantify or assess. When you've got a causal chain and you start manipulating causes, you're going to have effects from it which are going to change, which could affect equilibrium and end up negative. But let's go on real quick to Scott.
Hi, thanks, guys.
How you doing, Scott?
Doing really good. Thanks for taking my call. I'm a little nervous. I'm sorry, but
Go for it.
thanks. I come from a family of ministers. My entire family is very religious, and I did not have a bad religious experience growing up, and so it's not something I usually talk about with people because I feel like I'm, betraying them a little bit because, because they are, my family's actually ministers, so it's nice to have this forum. But I wanted to tell you how I got to my belief, or I did years and years and years of reading lots and lots of different books, and I just got to the point where the way I see things are from the dawn of time, just even now, from Aborigines to the banker in Wall Street, man can't control his surroundings. The Aborigines need to pray to the river gods in order to keep the river from flooding, and the Wall Street tycoon knows that he can't handle the market. And all of us, from the dawn of time, have needed to look to a higher power in order to control the things that we can't control. And I think that's the basis of needing a God and why people automatically believe in one, despite that, the fact that we're just not in control, period. There is no God,
We touched on it a little bit earlier when I was talking about the anxiety that you feel when you don't have an answer for something. That kind of goes, when you talked about the Aborigines praying for gods to control floods. That's something they don't have control for, and they don't know necessarily why it happens or how to stop it. So, there's a lot of anxiety in that type of everything that's out of your control.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming.
And I was going to ask you, too, like, when did y'all come to the realization that y'all have? Were you always that way, or was it, like, at the point where you thought, how could there be a God that would let me go bald so early?
Yeah.
Happy Easter, you godless douchebag.
Wow.
Wow.
See, you can have this really good conversation with really good points, and then you go and blow it for no reason. What a shame. Hey, Tracy.
Hey.
How you doing?
Good, thanks. I just wanted to talk about the guy that he was on when I first tuned in. He was talking about God and evolution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it always bugs me because it's such a dishonest position as far as how people live their lives. They do not live their lives in the way that they logic about God.
Right.
And one of the things I wanted to say is, if I could respond to that person, do you live your life with the knowledge of what's been tested and verified, or do you live your life based on what you believe is possible but unproven?
Yeah, every decision that isn't, do I believe in a God, or am I going to buy into this God philosophy? Everything that's outside of that little ball, you use science and reason and rational thinking for, and then you compartmentalize those religious beliefs, and they get special rules.
Well, the thing that I was thinking is, if this person's driving, when you're coming up to a red light, it's possible that light is broken. You could, or if it's green, it's possible it's broken. You could run that light and get your butt smashed by a semi. But what is the proof, and how would you verify that it's broken? Every time you've ever tested it, it usually works, or else if it's broken, there'll be a cop out there or somebody to stop you. So almost every time somebody goes through a green light, it works. And so when you're going through a green light, do you stop because you think it might be broken, or do you proceed because you trust what you've tested time and time again that's worked?
Right.
And it's okay for him to say maybe God, has a hand in these things, but my question would be, it's just as verifiable to say leprechauns had a hand in these things, and as long as he's okay understanding that positing a thing you can't verify is the same as saying nothing,
right, then
okay, you posited something, but it's completely unverifiable, therefore I believe it's unreasonable to assume it. There's no reason to posit it, but sure, you can posit it.
Yeah, it's like, so what? Maybe it exists, but it's useless to me.
Yeah, if you can't prove it, you can't verify it, what's the point of even discussing it?
Yeah, you might as well say blah blah blah.
Right, if you really truly believe that... What? Did I miss something?
No, he was just playing on my joke.
But anyway, if you really do believe something, the next step is to verify.
Right.
So, instead of arguing with people about, God exists, just get off your butt and verify it.
I would actually say that verification should come before belief, but I got your point.
Yeah, well, I mean, not necessarily verifying before belief,
right,
but maybe have some reason for it. And if you believe you have a reason for it, then go out and verify.
Yeah, and that kind of touches on earlier when we were talking about personal experience. There are things, whether it be love or whatever else, personal experience can fool you. We are really good at fooling ourselves because we're kind of tuned to recognize patterns, and in some cases we're really good at it, and in some cases we're really bad at it because we want to see patterns where patterns don't exist. So when we're trying to find an explanation for something we've seen or experienced or felt which doesn't seem consistent with the rest of reality, we're kind of quick to jump the gun.
Sure we are. Yeah, I've had people tell me that ghosts had done things in their home, like drop buttons on the stairway. There's no way that could have been there, so it must be a ghost. I'm like, why would you assume a ghost?
Yeah, like a ghost took my wallet and moved it from where I normally put it to, the top of the dryer.
Why not underwear gnomes, It
makes more sense to assume an intruder than a ghost.
Yes.
Because you know that an intruder could actually move something. It's like whatever. But anyway, that's...
We'll explain the broken glass and the...
But that's going to be my new T-shirt. It's going to say, go forth and verify.
Oh, that's a good one.
And I thought that was my only comment.
Well, as a reminder, Tracy was on last week. We're hoping to get her back on again from time to time. We'll be going to Threadgills after the show. Any atheist or atheist-friendly people who want to come down and meet the cast and crew and other ACA members are welcome to join us. It's down at Riverside. We normally get there between 6:30 and 6:45. Thanks for calling, Tracy. Hope we'll see you.
Okay,
see you, Tracy.
We've got
Troy.
Is it Troy?
Yeah.
Hey, Troy. How you doing?
Oh, any better than be me.
Wow, that's good.
The thing I wanted to ask you about is this issue of intelligent design. It's kind of like a repackaging of creationism,
right?
Like a sort of a way to kind of get it into the public schools through the fire door. Have you had any experience with other people who have tried to sell this to you in a way that no, this is completely different from creationism. This is a Genesis. Sure. This is intelligent design.
Sure.
Yeah.
And without handing over my atheist card, some of those objections are actually correct. Where you're talking about, for example, ideas about directed panspermia and other hypotheses which would include an intelligent designer but aren't what we would typically package as creationism, yeah, they fit under the intelligent design banner. Normally, though, when we're talking about intelligent design, we're talking about the particular creationism that's been repackaged with a lab code and is being pimped by the Discovery Institute and Michael Behe and Dembski and others.
Yeah, and you think about it, there's, you're going to have to teach from a textbook, right? And what are these textbooks saying? And they're all saying the same thing. And the people who want to push this forward are the people selling the textbooks. They're the ones who really have a stake in this. If you filter it all down, it's who's making the buck, and it's the textbook people who are writing of pandas and people or whatever the book is. That's where the lobby is. That's what they want. They want to sell people textbooks. The victims in this thing are the people who are going to believe in it, and the Christians who are going to follow this, and all they're going to do is spending more money on these textbooks that aren't benefiting them and making their children uneducated and unsuitable for college science preparatory classes.
But yeah, to your direct question, yes, some people do try to respin this as not creationism, and normally if I can actually talk to them, I normally would ask, number one, how would you define the designer that you're hypothesizing? And number two, what is your personal belief as to who or what that designer is? And most of the time you find out that they're Bible-believing, Yahweh creationist Christians.
Right.
They may not necessarily be young Earth creationists because, it's getting harder and harder to deny that the Earth is considerably older than 6,000 to 10,000 years. But they end up being a lot of creationists nonetheless. There are some, though. There are some that would voluntarily jump under the intelligent design banner with non-biblical creationist stuff.
Well, I've been watching this argument from both sides. I was raised horribly. My mother is one of Jehovah's Witnesses, while my father's a Baptist, meaning that I used to go door to door telling people not to dance. So I've watched the Baptist Church gradually accept an older Earth, while the JWs still kind of hold on to 7 days of creation, and then how many ever generations to Adam to Jesus, and the literalists that it's just the one thing I don't know, have you really had a chance to sit down and talk to your evil twin on public access that does the Christian show? The guy that looks very much like you, except for the mustacheless goatee.
You're talking about the Regeneration TV show?
Regeneration, yeah.
I actually have never watched it, and I've never had a conversation with him.
It would really be great to get you guys together. I think
I think Ashley did their show once. Came on as a guest on their show.
Oh, did he really? I'm a newcomer to Austin, so I wouldn't have maybe seen the whole.
And as a reminder, just not to derail your conversation, anybody who wants to can visit our website, www.atheist-community.org, and also atheist-experience.com, which you can get to directly or from that link. There's some pictures up there from past hosts, past shows, things we've done, and I believe there may still be a picture up there of Ashley on the Regeneration TV show.
Oh, great. Well, the only other thing that just kind of really struck me, having finally recovered from Christianity, I went through the born again, filled with the Holy Ghost. I used to speak in plurals and roll around on my tongue, and for a while ended up with the Jesus people in Chicago, which was a real eye-opening experience.
Are you talking about the 2x2s?
No, Jesus People USA, birthplace of a Christian rock group called Resurrection Band.
I'm not familiar with them.
Interesting bunch, but and I was there when they blew the lid off. You ever heard of a supposed ex-Satanist named Mike Warnke, whose ministry got blown out of the...
Mike Warnke? I thought Mike Warnke was a Christian music producer.
Mike Warnke, I think he did produce some Christian music, but he was also like a stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
And he had this whole background that he used to be, had been a Satanist.
Right, and that was all a big fraud.
Right.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that.
That got blown out of the water by John Trott of the Jesus People. So it's interesting that he got blown out of the water from his own camp.
That happens a lot. It's like if there's nobody else worth fighting, Christians will fight amongst themselves.
Oh, heck yes.
And as soon as there's somebody who's worth fighting, that fight's over now, and they're all on the same side, which is why, Protestants and Catholics can go back and forth about who's really a Christian and who's not. But when it comes time to count up how many Christians are in the country, they're both willing to accept that they're both Christians for that poll. So you get an 80% Christian society.
Well, and
they're probably counting both of us.
I think it's just interesting that there's that sort of level of convenience when a lot of people will stand by their Christianity when it's convenient, and then as soon as they start blindfolding and handing out cigarettes, it's amazing how many people.
They're the bad Christians, not me.
Right. Well, hey, have fun. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
Sure.
And thanks for reminding me about Mike Warnke. I had forgotten about that story. He was a Christian comedian, and I think maybe he sang, but I can't remember. Who was popular in the 80s, when I was still in high school and still a believer. Yeah. And he had a part of his testimony when he would go on stage and everything was this history of Satanism and everything else, and that was exposed to be at least mostly fraud, if not or questionable, if not outright fraud. So the whole lying for Jesus bit goes in there.
I think I was listening to Sam Kinison at the time that was happening.
I won't yell into the microphone with my Kinison impression. That would hurt.
Yeah.
So, we're waiting on the names of some new callers right now, but you can keep going with what you had.
Yeah, so, why, when you have a body plan, an evolution or any life form has to be successful on the body plan that its parent had. It can't, be drastic. I talked about how, if you're missing an arm, it's going to, decrease both your success of surviving and also your success of getting a mate. So the changes have to come subtly. But there are some things that happen that are pretty important. And the first I mentioned before is bilateral symmetry. That one side is like the other. And you see this through most of the higher animals, almost all of the deuterostomes, mammals, birds. You have reptiles, amphibians, all these you pretty much have the bilateral symmetry, even a snake. And another thing is...
But you also see that to some degree in plants. For example, the entire plant is not necessarily going to show the symmetry, but a leaf on either side of the stem will show that kind of symmetry.
Yeah, there's a couple differences. You usually have... in conifers, you often have a radial symmetry or a bilateral symmetry in the leaf patterns, and then you have sometimes you have a radial symmetry for some flowers, and you can count the number of, and then there's different types. Sometimes you either have a 3 or a 5 petal, or and then you have radials which are in multiples of 2, and there's different genes and different lineages that determine each of those. So you have this throughout. This is something that has come up more than once, but it's very difficult once you have a bilateral plan to change into a different type of plan. You're not going. Once one of your ancestors has formed a bilateral plan, you're stuck with that. You're not going to change that. So when we talk about the Precambrian area and the Cambrian explosion, a lot of these things, that's when a lot of these bilateral symmetries happened. A lot of these body plans were formed. And the reason you have, it seems like basic types from them are basically set the path for what is now, is because once you're set with certain characteristics, it's very difficult to form something else that's going to look drastically different.
Some patterns are more resilience, not the right word, but they're harder to change. If you break this part, the rest of it all falls apart. But you can keep this segment and alter things around it. So something like a bilateral symmetry, a column, you have all these parts that really are keystones to your development and your success. Once, some things can be changed and be deleted and you can function just fine, and other things, if you mess around with it, you're gone. It's not going to happen. You won't even make it past the zygote phase. Right. Let's go on to, we got more calls. Harold? Hello?
Hello?
Harold?
Yeah, did you guys watch Tim Russert this morning?
No.
Well, good thing. He had one of every religion on, and they all were very amicable, but they continue the killing. So And I've got a friend in Tucson, right on the border. And did you guys watch any of the Mexican demonstrations in Washington, D.C. with Kennedy and the Catholic bishop? And the bishop of the Lutheran church showed up, and I called my Lutheran friend and asked him how many wetbacks he took in today.
Well.
Okay. And then the Judas thing is going crazy, and Mary Magdalene as a prostitute, it's all over the TV. So just wants your comments. Goodbye.
Sure. Well, I'll be more than happy to comment a little bit on the Gospel of Judas, although you are probably more up on it right now than I am.
Yeah, I attended a lecture this past Thursday. I can't comment on the other things. I don't have TV right now and don't have much time for it. But on Thursday I went to a lecture at Texas State on the Gospel of Judas, and it was very interesting because it is a Gnostic gospel, and it's really not going to change anyone's view of Christianity. People aren't going to take this news and say, "Oh, I changed the way I think about God." That's not going to happen. There's so much information out there that's determining these things, and there's so many groups. People are set in their things. They're not analyzing Scripture to determine what their faith is. They're taking it from their parents or what's works for them socially. But what is interesting from an academic standpoint is that most of what we know of the Gnostics is taken from the opponents of the Gnostics. They were in the first, second, and third centuries. They were forced out of Christianity by what became eventually...
Well, they lost a doctrinal war, essentially.
Yeah.
Marcion and the Valentinians and everything were declared heretical for ideas that Jesus was either just a man or not even a man. They had alternate positions.
So they lost out. So their opponents got to write the history about them. So what we mostly know of the Gnostics is what their opponents wrote. So this is what's key about this is actually a Gnostic gospel, a person writing from their own perspective, so you get to hear what the Gnostics say about themselves, and that's what's interesting about it. And the Gnosticism is very different from the traditional belief structure because they believe in some things differently, and some of it actually makes more sense than the...
Well, yeah, I've said for a long time, one of the big things about this Gospel of Judas is that it portrays Judas as the hero, perhaps the most important, the best, the most loved of the disciple as far as Jesus is concerned. And in a way, that makes sense, because if you're a Christian, if you believe that Jesus needed to die and needed to rise from the dead in order to be a payment for your sins, then you should be, thanking Judas left and right for betraying. And the gospel makes the spin as though this was planned. Jesus, when he said, for example, one of you will betray me, it wasn't a prediction; it was an order to Judas.
And the Judas gospel, it's a first person telling, and it ends with the betrayal. That's the end of the gospel. It doesn't even go into the crucifixion and resurrection. That's where it ends.
Or the rest of Judas's story about the potter's field and his death and.
But that's where the involvement with Jesus is, because for the Gnostics, the existence of Jesus doesn't really matter. It's just how you get the knowledge of God, and how it's, they sort of believe in like the equivalent of a body thing, and that you have these sparks that exist that were trapped from the spirit world, and you either have one or you don't. So some people, you're predestined. You either have one of these things or you don't. So the Gnostics would say that Matt and I and the other people on the show don't have these sparks, so we can't recognize the...
We're spark free.
Yeah.
There's other also within the Gnostic tradition are they have a big tradition of secret, hidden learnings, which you can only learn by actually being a member and being indoctrinated and learning this like word of mouth behind closed doors, and you need to keep it secret and not share it, that type of thing. But it's going. Is it Storm?
Yes, it is.
How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. I had a lot of trouble getting through. The operator gave me a little bit of a hard time. I think because my questions are so good.
Is it? Is it because your questions are good?
It really is. I was talking about free will with the operator, and he said that free will exists because he knows it exists. And that kind of sounds like the circular arguments you get from a lot of Christians and whatnot. I was wondering what your thoughts on free will are. Do you have free will? Can you prove that you have free will? And if you are made up of, essentially, a human being is a chemical reaction. Now, those are determined by the laws of physics. Do you have free will, or are the laws of physics just determining your actions?
This is a huge discussion to be coming in with like 4.5 minutes left.
I know I called from the very start, but this guy's talking about love for 10 minutes in the first 10 minutes, and just a lot of ridiculous questions. This is the best question.
Yeah, well, it may well be. It may also be the one that's the most difficult to answer. From my point of view, I have the only type of free will that matters. I have free will in the sense of being a free agent, even if it's an illusion, to choose between options. It doesn't matter that we may and seem to be living in a deterministic world. I find that determinism plus an omniscient over being God, that lends itself to no free will. But I don't find that determinism itself necessarily excludes free will. In the sense that matters, because I can imagine the possibilities of the results of my actions, and I can apparently have a choice, and how I choose, even if it may have been predetermined, will have consequences which are unavoidable, and therefore that knowing the consequences exist, knowing potential consequences, steers my action, and it's as free as it can get.
But whether or not it's apparent to you, it either is or isn't. You either have free will or you do not.
Sure.
So if you are if you do believe that the laws of physics are true, they are held true, right? They are true, tested.
They're operating on me.
Then aren't your actions actually determined by the laws of physics and not this omniscient idea? You mean you're applying this duality that both the laws of physics hold true, yet you have free will. It may be apparent to you, but it can really only be one or the other.
Well, I don't know if it's simply a one or another thing. I mean, it's how you define will. Things are deterministic to a certain degree, and you have a range of choices that you can make, and a range of parameters that you can work within. So, it could be deterministic whether, how many choices you can. There could be like A through Z, but because of, what you have to work with, only G through L are available to you, and you have free will within those range, but you don't have ultimate free will.
That's very gray, isn't it?
It is very gray. I don't have
conscious, or you're not conscious.
Well, you have to define.
We're down to like 2 minutes. I'd advise. Why don't you go ahead and email your question at tv@atheist-community.org, and I'd be more than happy to have a discussion offline or on another.
And make sure you define what your definition of free will is.
Well, we can talk about that in the discussion. And you're also welcome to call back on another one, but now we're down to like 2 minutes. Just to answer your question as best as possible, I generally consider myself a compatibilist along the lines of Daniel Dennett.
All I'm saying is there may be things that you may not completely understand, so at least let's keep an open mind. I'm not a Christian.
I have no... See, now, this is the problem. I don't claim to have complete understanding, and I do have an open mind. It's just that my mind changes when evidence, rational thought, and logic demonstrate that my mind should change. It's not open to obscure possibilities and claims about pixies and dragons and gods.
But you believe in free will, yet you have no evidence for it.
I have evidence. No. You've gone from one thing to another. It's not that I don't have evidence for free will, much in the same way of the discussion earlier with regard to love. I have evidence, personally, that from my point of view, I have enough of a free will to qualify as free will. I have the only free will that matters, and that from my perspective, I have a choice, and I will accept the consequences of either choice. But we're about almost out of time.
Okay. But it's no different from Christians who believe in God. I mean, they have their personal experience.
Oh, it is?
You have yours.
No. It's... Okay, if a Christian claims to believe from personal experience, there's nothing anybody can argue with about that.
Yeah,
the point is about proving it to somebody else. So, with regard to your question on free will, it doesn't matter what I believe with regard to what you believe.
They don't have to prove it to anyone else, but if they're going to insist that other people abide by the laws of it, they better damn well prove it, because I'm not going to listen to it unless I see the evidence.
It doesn't matter whether I think there's free will. If I say there is free will and you will believe it, I better have a reason. We'll see you all next week. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.